So I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. We're going to start with the bad news first. What are some of the things that are impacting podcasting as we know it in 2023? The kind of the big overarching theme is really concerns about the economy. There's a lot going on in the economy right now. As Bloomberg reports,
Correction, the following is from The Verge.
there have been quite a few disruptions in 2022. The war in Ukraine pushing up energy costs, high inflation making everything from vegetables to auto insurance more expensive, and rising interest rates pushing stock prices down. So what does that mean for podcasting? Well, tech and media companies, the tech and media space has already been impacted by some of these economic fears. There's been talks about a possible recession. Some people believe we're already in a recession. Some believe that we're about to jump into one. And when that happens, you know, like we mentioned, interest rates go up. People stop spending as much. They start saving more. That means less revenue that goes into these companies. And you know, when you have less revenue to work with, in a lot of cases, you have to start making cuts. And when you make cuts, when you're faced with a decision of what to cut, typically it's often the marketing budgets that end up going first. There've already been layoffs and hiring freezes within the tech space. Bloomberg, again, reports that Acast AB, which is a podcast company, recently laid off 15% of its workforce. SiriusXM is planning to reduce its staff. Spotify laid off some of its podcast editorial workers, in addition to employees at its podcast at its Gimlet Media and Parcast studios. And also NPR revealed that it would institute budget cuts and a near hiring freeze. So we're already seeing some movement in the media space, and that's trickling down. And what that's doing is it's resulting in weakening ad sales. As I mentioned, when these companies are looking to save money, they're cutting their marketing budgets. So from The Verge, when businesses have to make a choice between things like staffing, operations, consumer experience, and marketing is usually the first to go. This means that fewer ad dollars are flowing into the businesses that depend on them, which includes traditional media, digital media, and social media. Podcasting is clearly under that umbrella there. The Verge continues, for 2023, eMarketer estimates that podcast ad revenue should still grow by 28.8%, which is nearly the same growth rate as 2022, but that is also about half the growth rate podcasting experienced in 2021. Worse, that rate is expected to drop by more than 10 points in 2024. So to kind of summarize all that, what does that mean? There's less ad sales, which means less money in the pockets of the media companies and the podcasts that they license. And this could ultimately lead to less and less investment into the space and potentially into new podcasts. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see where that goes. We'll have to wait and see how the economy progresses through the year. Hopefully it's not as bad as they say. Next, there's certainly some oversaturation within the podcast market. Forbes reports around the globe, there are more than 400 million podcast listeners who tune in for all sorts of content. Because of that high listenership, there are over 2 million independent podcasts with tens of millions of episodes between them. So what does that mean? It just means that there's a lot to go around. Podcasting has become mainstream in many ways. It's been around for a long time. It's been around since 2004. And, when something catches on like that, you're going to get a lot of people, including myself, who kind of jump in to try to take advantage of it. And there's been a lot of talk about how, the popularity of podcasting, it received a big push in the last couple of years. So, naturally, a lot of new podcasts popped up. But what that's done is it's sort of created an environment where it's harder for new creators, especially, to kind of make a name for themselves. Bloomberg reports, as of August, none of the 10 most popular podcasts in the U.S. had debuted in the last couple of years. For new podcasts, getting widespread attention can feel harder than ever. Not the best dynamic for producers looking to attract outside investors in new products. So it's becoming harder and harder for the little guy to make a name for themselves, while a lot of these big players are kind of dominating those top spaces and earning kind of the bulk of the revenue. So there's just a lot to choose from out there. And it's just getting harder to come up and make a name for yourself. And I feel that as well. There's also outdated tech and a lack of innovation within the podcasting space. Nick Hilton, who is a writer and podcast entrepreneur, wrote in a piece on Medium, he said, "For a long time, I felt that podcasting has been stagnant, content to run off aging technology and unwilling to innovate its way into new demographics. A podcast in 2022 looks and sounds almost indistinguishable from a podcast in 2004, and in every year of the medium's existence, it's been described as the next big thing." And I would agree with that. Podcasting has been around really for a long time. I remember it was back in 2009 when I started my first podcast. It was just a very simple audio podcast. I did it for a short period of time just because I was interested in it and wanted to kind of test the waters a little bit. But that was all the way back in 2009. And if you think about it today, I mean, podcasting, at least on the audio side, really works the exact same way that it did back then. So not much has changed in that respect. What's really changed is how podcasting has evolved into other areas like video and and how it's being used on social media. In a way, it's been hyped up for so long, but at its core, it just really hasn't evolved much. It's almost as if podcasting is kind of outpacing itself. It's becoming more popular, but you are not seeing the innovation match the speed at which podcasting is growing in popularity, if that makes sense. Then we have bad deals and industry practices. I haven't dove into this too extensively yet, but I do recall seeing some headlines that talk a lot about how there's been some deceptive reporting within the podcast industry. People reporting, I don't want to say fake, but just kind of fudging the numbers when it comes to the listenership that they're getting from some of these audio podcasts. And they're doing that obviously as a way to attract more advertisers and to generate more ad revenue. But that's a problem. And, I think you can only get away with lying for so long before it's going to come back to bite everybody in the butt. Vulture said one producer, "I think there's going to be a wider reality check about numbers and how they relate to the financing of shows. Everyone in the industry knows numbers are often fudged or based off bullshit stats. And with the global economy on precarious footing, perhaps speculative capital's role in podcasting will force some shows to close and perhaps nudge us closer to a reckoning of what a podcast really is for and how its success is measured." So really, some people are expecting in 2023 and beyond a kind of a correction within the podcast industry, kind of a term that people like to use, a draining of the swamp in the industry, which could ultimately be a good thing, which we're going to touch on in a little bit. But just to kind of summarize, this is the main reasons why people believe that podcasting could be in some trouble. First of all, you've got economic concerns, which is resulting in weakened advertising or weakened audio ad sales. You've got oversaturation, too many podcasts out there. You've got outdated tech and lack of innovation in the space, and just some bad practices going around.